Rodney Malone stood frozen in his own hallway at 4:47 a.m., his hand gripping the doorknob to the kitchen, listening to his wife's voice drift through the bedroom door. The 38-year-old warehouse supervisor had been about to leave for his first job of the day when her words stopped him cold. "He's just my personal ATM," Vanessa laughed into the phone, her voice bright with amusement. "The idiot actually believes I'm going to change." The worn leather strap of Rodney's work bag cut into his palm as his grip tightened. For 3 years, he'd been working 5 jobs to pay off the crushing debt his wife had accumulated before their marriage. Debt she'd promised was under control. Debt she'd sworn she was working to fix. Now, standing in the darkness of his own home, he heard the truth spelled out in her careless laughter. "Rodney! Oh, he'll never leave," Vanessa continued, completely unaware her husband was on the other side of that door. "He's too honorable. His words, not mine. He actually thinks he's being noble, working himself to death for me." What Vanessa didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Rodney had been keeping records. Every receipt, every bank transfer, every credit card statement, every lie. 3 thick folders sat in his locker at the warehouse, documenting everything. And in exactly 72 hours, he had an appointment with a divorce attorney that would change everything. The microwave clock cast a faint green glow across the kitchen tiles. Rodney forced himself to breathe, to think, to move. He had 30 minutes before his shift started at the warehouse. After that, he'd rush to his second job doing data entry from a coffee shop during his lunch break. Then back to the warehouse until 6, followed by his evening shift, driving for a rideshare service until midnight. On weekends, he did freelance graphic design and work security at a local mall. 5 jobs, 90-hour work weeks, all to pay off $127,000 in credit card debt his wife had racked up before they married, debt she'd tearfully confessed to only after they'd said, "I do." I know," Vanessa was saying now, her tone shifting to something like mock sympathy. "But seriously, Jenna, you should see him lately. He looks like a zombie. Dark circles, losing weight, falling asleep at the dinner table. It's actually kind of pathetic." The word hit Rodney like a physical blow. Pathetic. He thought about last Tuesday, when he dozed off in his soup after a 16-hour workday. Vanessa had laughed and taken a photo, posting it on social media with the caption, "My hard-working man." He'd thought she was being affectionate. Now he understood she'd been mocking him publicly. "The best part?" Vanessa's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "He doesn't even know I'm still shopping. I just have the packages sent to my sister's place. He thinks I'm being so good, so responsible. Meanwhile, I've got another 15,000 on a card he doesn't know about." Rodney felt his stomach drop. Another 15,000. After everything. He'd met Vanessa 4 years ago at a hospital fundraiser. She'd been volunteering at the registration desk, stunning in a blue dress, her smile warm and genuine. Or so he'd thought. She worked in marketing, drove a sensible sedan, lived in a modest apartment. Everything about her had seemed stable, grounded. Their courtship had been a whirlwind. 6 months of romantic dinners, weekend getaways, talks about the future. She'd seemed perfect, intelligent, ambitious, caring. When she'd proposed they get married after a year together, Rodney had felt like the luckiest man alive. The debt confession came 3 weeks after the wedding. "I need to tell you something," she'd said one evening, tears streaming down her face. "I have some credit card debt, more than I told you about before." Rodney had known about the small amount she'd mentioned during their engagement, maybe $5,000 or $6,000 from a rough patch after college. He'd assured her they'd handle it together. "How much?" he'd asked gently, taking her hand. $127,000. The number had stunned him into silence. Vanessa had explained through sobs how it had happened. A shopping addiction she'd hidden from everyone. Maxed out cards used to pay minimum payments on other cards. Years of living beyond her means while maintaining the appearance of stability. Her car wasn't paid off. It was leased. Her apartment had been subsidized by her parents, who'd finally cut her off. The fundraiser where they'd met? She'd been court-ordered to volunteer as part of a shoplifting settlement. "I want to change," she'd sworn, clutching his hands. "I need help. Professional help. I know I have a problem, Rodney, but I love you, and I want to fix this. Please don't leave me." Rodney had been raised to honor his commitments, to stand by the people he loved. His parents had weathered serious storms together, his father's layoff, his mother's cancer scare, and they'd come out stronger. Marriage meant partnership, meant facing challenges together. So he'd stayed, and he'd worked. The warehouse job was his primary employment, 40 hours a week at $22 an hour. It covered their basic living expenses, the small apartment they'd moved into, utilities, food, his car payment. Everything else went to Vanessa's debt. The data entry gig brought in another $800 a month. The rideshare driving averaged $200 monthly after expenses. Freelance design was unpredictable, anywhere from $500 to $2,000 depending on the month. Mall security added another $600 every weekend. In 3 years, Rodney had paid off $73,000 of Vanessa's debt. He'd been tracking their progress in a spreadsheet, celebrating each milestone. They'd refinanced some of the cards to lower interest rates, cut expenses to the bone. He'd sold his beloved motorcycle to make a large payment. Vanessa had attended 2 months of financial counseling before claiming she'd graduated from the program. Rodney had believed they were making progress together, that Vanessa was changing, healing, becoming the responsible partner he thought he was marrying. Now, standing in the darkness, listening to her mock him, he understood the truth. She'd never intended to change. She'd found someone willing to fund her lifestyle, and she was milking it for everything she could get. "Jenna, you should have seen what came yesterday," Vanessa continued, her voice full of excitement. "This Italian leather bag I've been wanting. $1,200. It's gorgeous. Worth every penny." $1,200. Rodney had been eating ramen and peanut butter sandwiches for lunch to save money. He'd been wearing the same 3 work shirts for 2 years, the collars fraying but still acceptable. He'd been walking to his warehouse job instead of driving to save gas money, while Vanessa bought $1,200 handbags. "I know Rodney thinks we're almost out of debt," she said. "Poor thing made this whole spreadsheet tracking our progress. It's actually sweet in a sad way. He has no idea I've been taking out new cards. As long as I keep the statements from reaching the apartment, he's clueless." The bedroom door opened suddenly. Rodney had been so focused on Vanessa's voice that he hadn't noticed the conversation ending. His wife appeared in the doorway, still in her silk pajamas, the expensive set Rodney thought had been a birthday gift from her sister, her phone in one hand. She jumped when she saw him, her eyes widening. "Rodney! God, you scared me. What are you doing standing in the dark?" His mouth felt dry. The question he wanted to ask stuck in his throat. "How long have you been lying to me?" But something held him back. Some instinct told him not to reveal what he'd heard. Not yet. "Couldn't sleep," he managed, his voice rough. "Heading to work." Vanessa's expression shifted to concern so quickly, so smoothly, that Rodney wondered how many other expressions had been just as calculated. "Baby, you work too hard. You look exhausted. Maybe you should call in sick. Take a rest day?" The care in her voice would have touched him yesterday. Today, knowing what she'd just said to her friend, it made his skin crawl. "Can't afford to," Rodney said, which was true. "Bills to pay." "I know." Vanessa crossed to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. She smelled like the expensive perfume he'd assumed was another gift from her sister. "You're amazing, you know that. Everything you do for us." Us. As if they were a team. As if she wasn't actively sabotaging everything he was working toward. Rodney forced himself to return the hug, to press a kiss to the top of her head, to play the role of the devoted husband for a few seconds longer. "I'll be home late tonight, picking up an extra rideshare shift." "More overtime?" Vanessa pulled back, her face arranged in sympathy. "Rodney, seriously, you're going to burn out. We're doing fine. The debt isn't going anywhere. You can slow down a little." The debt isn't going anywhere. She was right about that, just not in the way she meant. "Few more months of this pace, and we'll be in a much better place," Rodney said, echoing the same thing he'd been telling himself for 3 years. "Then things will ease up." Vanessa smiled, that same warm, genuine-seeming smile that had made him fall in love with her. "You're the best husband a girl could ask for." She kissed him goodbye, her lips soft against his, and Rodney left for work carrying the weight of her betrayal like a stone in his chest. The warehouse was a 40-minute walk through Seattle's pre-dawn streets. Rodney usually used the time to listen to podcasts, to mentally prepare for the day, to enjoy the quiet before the chaos. This morning, all he could think about was Vanessa's voice. "He's just my personal ATM." His supervisor, Ray, noticed something was off immediately. "You all right, Malone? You look like hell." "Didn't sleep great," Rodney said, which wasn't entirely a lie. He'd been up until 2 a.m. finishing a logo design for a client, trying to earn an extra $300. "Your wife still giving you grief about the hours?" Rodney almost laughed. Ray had gotten the wrong impression months ago when Rodney had mentioned Vanessa wasn't happy about his schedule. Ray assumed she wanted him home more. Something like that. The morning shift was brutal, unloading 2 delivery trucks in the freezing warehouse, his body screaming from exhaustion, his mind replaying Vanessa's words on loop. During his lunch break, instead of doing data entry at the coffee shop like usual, Rodney did something different. He went to his locker and pulled out the 3 folders he'd been keeping. Rodney wasn't sure exactly when he'd started documenting everything. Maybe 6 months into the debt repayment, when he'd noticed some inconsistencies in their budget. Maybe it was just his naturally organized nature, the same trait that made him good at graphic design and data entry. Whatever the reason, he'd been meticulous. Folder 1. Bank statements showing every payment he'd made toward Vanessa's debt. Every transfer, every check, every dollar, documented with dates and confirmation numbers. Total amount paid over 3 years, $73,247. Folder 2. Credit card statements from Vanessa's accounts that he'd managed to access. The original balances, the payment schedules, the interest calculations. He'd also been photographing the mail that came to their apartment, including several letters from credit card companies he didn't recognize. Letters Vanessa always grabbed first and said were just junk mail. Folder 3, the smoking gun. Screenshots of Vanessa's social media over the past year, showing purchases she'd claimed weren't hers. Photos of her at expensive restaurants when she told him she was grabbing fast food with girlfriends. Check-in locations at luxury spas and boutiques. During times she'd said she was at work or running errands. He'd felt guilty creating this folder, like he was betraying his wife by documenting her lies. Now, sitting in the break room with the folder spread before him, Rodney felt only clarity. His phone rang. Vanessa's mother, Kathleen. "Rodney, darling." Kathleen's voice was warm, affectionate. "How are you?" Kathleen Blake had always treated Rodney well. She was a retired teacher, practical and kind, and she'd seemed genuinely happy when Vanessa married him. What Kathleen didn't know was that Vanessa had been lying to her parents just as thoroughly as she'd been lying to Rodney. "I'm well, Mrs. Blake. How are you?" "Oh, you know me. Can't complain. Listen, I'm calling because Bill and I want to take you and Vanessa to dinner this weekend. Nothing fancy, just that Italian place you like. We haven't seen you two in ages." Rodney's throat tightened. Bill and Kathleen were good people. They were going to be devastated when they learned what their daughter had been doing. "That sounds wonderful," Rodney said. "Let me check with Vanessa about her schedule." "Perfect. And Rodney, we just want you to know how much we appreciate everything you do for our daughter. We know about the debt. We know you've been working so hard to help her get back on her feet. You're a good man. If you enjoy stories of sweet revenge and financial justice, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. And drop a comment below. What do you think Rodney is going to do? Let's see who guesses the ending correctly. After Kathleen hung up, Rodney sat in the break room, staring at his phone. Vanessa's parents thought he was noble, working multiple jobs to help their daughter. They had no idea she was still shopping, still spending, still lying. They had no idea she called him pathetic behind his back. Rodney pulled up his phone calendar. His attorney appointment was in 3 days, Monday afternoon at 2 p.m. He'd scheduled it during his lunch break, telling Vanessa he had a required safety training at work. The consultation was free, but Rodney had already prepared a list of questions, organized his documents, outlined the timeline of his marriage and Vanessa's deception. He'd scheduled the appointment 2 weeks ago, after discovering the shopping bags hidden in the garage under a tarp. Designer clothes with tags still attached, expensive shoes in boxes, luxury items Vanessa had never mentioned buying. She'd been so careful, having packages sent elsewhere, hiding purchases, maintaining the facade of responsibility. But Rodney had worked in inventory management for 15 years. He knew how to track things, how to notice discrepancies, how to follow paper trails. And over the past 6 months, as his suspicions grew, he'd become very, very good at finding what Vanessa was hiding. His phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "Love you, baby. Don't work too hard today." Rodney stared at the message, at the heart emoji, at the casual endearment from someone who'd called him an idiot just hours before. He typed back, "Love you too. See you tonight." The lie felt bitter on his tongue, but necessary, because Rodney had learned something important in the past 3 years of exhausting work. Patience pays off. Preparation matters. And the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's justice, served cold and documented. What Vanessa didn't know was that Rodney had already contacted 2 of the credit card companies she thought he knew nothing about. He'd explained he was her husband, inquired about the accounts, learned that she'd listed him as an authorized user without his knowledge on one of them. The company rep had helpfully confirmed the balance, $23,400. What Vanessa didn't know was that Rodney had been recording his work hours meticulously, documenting every extra shift, every sacrifice, every dollar that had gone toward her debt while she secretly accumulated more. What Vanessa didn't know was that Rodney had screenshots of text messages she'd sent to her sister about their shopping trips. Messages where Vanessa explicitly stated she was hiding purchases from her clueless husband. And what Vanessa definitely didn't know was that this morning's overheard conversation had been the final piece Rodney needed. Because Washington was a 2-party consent state for recordings, but it was perfectly legal to testify about conversations you'd overheard firsthand. Rodney closed the folders, locked them carefully back in his locker, and headed back to the warehouse floor. He had 72 hours until the attorney appointment, 72 hours to keep playing the devoted husband, 72 hours to gather any final documentation he might need. And then, he thought as he lifted another box onto the conveyor belt, his muscles screaming and his mind crystal clear, then the real work would begin. Vanessa thought she'd married an ATM. She thought she'd found someone too honorable, too devoted to ever fight back. She was about to learn exactly how wrong she'd been, because Rodney Malone wasn't pathetic, he wasn't clueless, and he definitely wasn't anyone's fool. He was just a man who'd been keeping very, very careful records. The shift ended at 6 p.m. Rodney grabbed his rideshare tablet and headed out into Seattle's early evening traffic. His first passenger was a businessman heading to a downtown hotel, distracted by his phone the entire ride. The second was a young couple celebrating an anniversary, laughing and holding hands in his back seat. Rodney watched them in the rearview mirror and remembered being that happy once. Remembered believing his marriage was real, his wife's love genuine, his sacrifices meaningful. Now he knew better. His phone buzzed around 10 p.m., a text from Vanessa asking when he'd be home. Rodney responded that he'd grabbed 2 more rides and would be back around later. Midnight. She sent back a sad emoji and, "I miss you." He wondered if she'd been on the phone with friends again, laughing about her pathetic husband who worked himself to death while she shopped. He wondered how many people knew the truth about their marriage. How many of Vanessa's friends were in on the joke? It didn't matter. In 72 hours, everything would change. Rodney's last passenger of the night was an elderly woman named Dorothy, heading home from her daughter's house after babysitting her grandchildren. She chatted pleasantly during the ride, asking Rodney about his life. "You married?" Dorothy asked as they neared her neighborhood. "Yes, ma'am, 3 years." "She must miss you, working such long hours." Rodney's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I'm sure she does. My late husband worked 2 jobs when our kids were young," Dorothy continued. "It was hard, but we got through it together. Partnership, that's what marriage is. Pulling together toward the same goal." "That's what I always thought," Rodney said quietly. Dorothy patted his shoulder as she climbed out of the car. "You're a good man. I can tell. Your wife is lucky to have you." Rodney drove home through empty streets, Dorothy's words echoing in his mind. Partnership, pulling together, the same goal. He'd been pulling alone for 3 years, dragging the weight of Vanessa's lies and debts, while she added more weight behind his back, laughing at his efforts. Not anymore. When Rodney finally walked through the apartment door at 12:37 a.m., Vanessa was already asleep, sprawled across their bed in expensive pajamas, her phone charging on the nightstand. He stood in the doorway watching her for a moment. This woman he'd married, this stranger he'd been killing himself for. In the morning, he'd wake up at 4:30 a.m. and do it all again. 5 jobs, 90 hours, one more day of pretending everything was fine. But the clock was ticking, and Rodney Malone was very good at counting down. The weekend before Rodney's attorney appointment passed in a surreal haze of normalcy. Saturday morning, he woke at 5 a.m. for his mall security shift, came home to find Vanessa still sleeping, and spent the afternoon doing freelance design work while she went to lunch with girlfriends. Sunday, they attended Bill and Kathleen's Italian dinner as planned, where Vanessa played the role of devoted wife so convincingly that Rodney almost admired the performance. "You two seem so happy," Kathleen said over dessert, beaming at them across the table. "Tired, maybe, but happy." "We are," Vanessa said, squeezing Rodney's hand. Her fingers were warm, her smile radiant. "Rodney has been working so hard for us. I'm the luckiest woman alive." Bill raised his wine glass. "To Rodney and to young people who still understand what commitment means." Rodney clinked glasses with his in-laws, smiled at his wife, and counted down the hours. 48 hours until the truth came out. Monday morning arrived cold and gray, typical Seattle weather for late November. Rodney went through his usual routine: warehouse shift starting at 5 a.m., lunch break data entry at the coffee shop. Except today, instead of sitting at his usual corner table typing spreadsheet entries, Rodney drove 15 minutes across town to the offices of Bradford and Associates Family Law. The attorney, Jennifer Bradford, was a sharp-eyed woman in her early 50s with gray-streaked hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. Her office was practical rather than luxurious: framed degrees on the wall, a solid desk, chairs that were comfortable but not expensive. Rodney appreciated the lack of pretense. "Mr. Malone," she said, shaking his hand firmly, "thank you for coming. I understand you're on a lunch break, so let's make efficient use of your time." Rodney laid out the 3 folders on her desk. "My wife has been lying to me for 3 years. I've been working 5 jobs to pay off $127,000 in credit card debt she accumulated before our marriage. She promised she was changing, getting help, being responsible. Last Friday, I overheard her on the phone telling a friend I'm her personal ATM and admitting she's taken out more secret credit cards." Jennifer opened the first folder, her expression neutral but attentive as she scanned through the bank statements. "How much have you paid toward her original debt?" $73,247. "And these new cards she's taken out?" "At least one, I can confirm. $23,400. She mentioned another $15,000 to her friend, but I haven't located that account yet." Jennifer's eyebrows rose slightly. "So potentially $38,000 in new debt while you've been working to eliminate the old debt?" "Correct." She moved to the second folder, studying the credit card statements and photographed mail. "Did you sign or authorize any of these accounts?" "No, although I discovered she listed me as an authorized user on one without my knowledge." "That's problematic for her, not for you." Jennifer made notes on a legal pad. "Washington is a community property state, but debts incurred before marriage typically remain separate. However, any money you've spent paying her premarital debts is arguably a gift unless you can prove otherwise. These records help significantly." Rodney had researched this extensively during countless late nights between shifts. "I can prove I was told the debt was being managed responsibly. I can prove she lied about her spending. And I can testify that she's been taking out new debt while hiding it from me." Jennifer opened the third folder, scrolling through the social media screenshots. Her expression hardened. "These show a pattern of deception: expensive purchases, luxury experiences, all while you worked yourself to exhaustion. And this final piece, you personally overheard her call you her personal ATM?" "Friday morning, 4:47 a.m. I can describe the entire conversation in detail." The attorney sat back, tapping her pen against the legal pad. "Mr. Malone, I'm going to be direct with you. This is a strong case. Your documentation is exceptional, but divorce is expensive, emotionally draining, and time-consuming. Are you absolutely certain this is what you want? Rodney thought about Vanessa's laugh, about the word pathetic, about 3 years of sacrificing everything while she accumulated more debt behind his back. He thought about the elderly passenger Dorothy saying, partnership, and realizing he hadn't been in a partnership at all. He'd been in a con. I'm certain. Then here's what we're going to do. Jennifer pulled out a fresh legal pad and began writing. First, we're going to request a formal separation of finances immediately. Second, we're filing for dissolution of marriage on grounds of fraud and deception. Third, we're going to seek reimbursement for the money you paid toward her premarital debt, all 73,147, by arguing it was paid under false pretenses. Rodney felt his heart rate accelerate. Can we actually do that? Washington case law on this is complex, but given your documentation of her continued deception and explicit statements about manipulating you, we have a solid argument. I can't guarantee we'll recover the full amount, but we can make a compelling case. Jennifer looked up from her notes. I also recommend we investigate those credit cards where she listed you without authorization. If we can prove fraud, there may be criminal implications. I don't want her arrested, Rodney said quickly. Despite everything, the thought of Vanessa in handcuffs made him uncomfortable. I just want out of this marriage and to recover what I can. Understood, but the threat of criminal charges can be useful leverage in settlement negotiations. We'll keep that option in our back pocket. Jennifer checked her watch. You need to get back to work. Here's what happens next. I'm drafting the initial petition today. We'll file Wednesday. She'll be served with papers either Thursday or Friday. Once that happens, everything changes. Are you prepared for that? Rodney thought about the question. Was he prepared for Vanessa's reaction? For her tears, her anger, her inevitable claims that he was being cruel? He thought about the word pathetic again. I'm prepared. Jennifer stood, extending her hand. Good, because Mr. Malone, you're about to get your life back. Rodney returned to the warehouse 15 minutes late, claiming his data entry job had run over. Ray gave him a pointed look but didn't say anything. The rest of the afternoon was a blur of physical labor and mental calculation. Wednesday was 2 days away. Once the papers were filed, there was no going back. That night, Vanessa was in an exceptionally good mood. She'd made dinner. Pasta with jarred sauce, nothing fancy, but more effort than she usually put in. She'd lit candles and poured wine. What's the occasion? Rodney asked genuinely, confused. No occasion. I just wanted to do something nice for my hard-working husband. Vanessa smiled across the table. You look stressed lately. Everything okay at work? The question was so perfectly timed, so carefully delivered, that Rodney wondered if she'd somehow sensed something was off. But no, her expression was open, curious, apparently genuine. Just tired, he said. It's been a long few months. Maybe it's time to think about cutting back, Vanessa suggested. You've been doing 5 jobs for so long. Maybe drop one? We're doing better financially now, right? We could manage with less income. Rodney knew exactly what we're doing better financially meant in Vanessa's mind. They were making enough money that she could continue her secret spending without him noticing the missing funds. If he cut back to 4 jobs, she'd have less scrutiny, more freedom. I'll think about it, he lied. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel if you have not, because the ending of this story will blow your mind. And drop a comment below telling me what you think Rodney should do next. Tuesday crawled by with agonizing slowness. Rodney went through his routine mechanically. Warehouse, data entry, warehouse, rideshare, while his mind raced ahead to Wednesday. Jennifer had texted him that afternoon. Petition drafted, filing at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Everything proceeds as planned. Everything proceeds as planned. Such simple words for such a life-altering action. That evening, Rodney stood in their apartment bathroom, staring at his reflection in the mirror. He looked like hell. Dorothy had been right. Dark circles under his eyes, weight loss making his cheekbones sharp, skin pale from exhaustion and indoor work. 3 years of 90-hour weeks had aged him visibly. He thought about Kathleen saying tired, maybe, but happy. He hadn't been happy in a long time. He'd been surviving. Tomorrow that would start to change. Wednesday morning, November 29th, 2024. Rodney woke before his alarm, adrenaline flooding his system. At exactly 9 a.m., while he was unloading a truck at the warehouse, Jennifer Bradford would be filing divorce papers at the King County Courthouse. His phone buzzed at 9:47 a.m. Filed, process server will attempt service Thursday between 2 to 6 p.m. at your apartment. Be prepared for her to contact you immediately after. Rodney read the message 3 times, his hands shaking slightly. After 3 years of working himself to exhaustion, after months of suspicion and investigation, after that devastating conversation he'd overheard, the wheels of justice were finally turning. Thursday afternoon, Rodney made sure he was working his rideshare shift during the service window. He couldn't be home when Vanessa received the papers. He couldn't trust himself to maintain composure during her initial reaction. At 3:17 p.m., his phone exploded with notifications. 7 missed calls from Vanessa, 12 text messages, starting with confusion. Someone came to the door with legal papers and rapidly escalating to panic. Rodney, what is this? Is this real? Call me right now. Then voicemails. Rodney pulled over to a gas station parking lot and listened to them with his heart pounding. The first 2 were confused, almost laughing. Rodney, baby, I think someone's pranking us. There's a guy at the door saying he needs to serve me with divorce papers. This is crazy, right? Call me back. The third was uncertain. Rodney, I signed for the papers because he said I had to. This says you're filing for divorce. This can't be real. You would have told me. We would have talked about this. Please call me. The fourth was angry. You're actually doing this? You're throwing away our marriage without even discussing it? After everything we've been through? The fifth was desperate. Rodney, please, please just come home so we can talk about this. Whatever's wrong, we can fix it. I love you. Please don't do this. Rodney deleted all of them. 3 more calls came in while he sat in the parking lot. He declined each one and sent a single text. I've retained Jennifer Bradford of Bradford and Associates as my attorney. All communication needs to go through her. Her contact information is in the papers you received. Vanessa's response was immediate and furious. You're seriously going to do this through lawyers? You won't even talk to me? After I stood by you, supported you, loved you through everything? This is how you repay me. The audacity of that message, claiming she'd supported him, made Rodney's jaw clench. But he'd been advised by Jennifer not to engage, and he trusted her judgment. He put his phone on silent and drove home. Vanessa was waiting in the living room when he arrived at midnight. She'd clearly been crying. Her eyes were red-rimmed, mascara smudged. She looked small and vulnerable in her pajamas, curled on the couch with the divorce petition spread on the coffee table. Rodney, her voice broke. Why? He stood in the doorway, his work bag still on his shoulder, and looked at his wife. She'd been right about one thing. He looked like a zombie, but she'd been wrong about the rest. I heard you, Vanessa. She blinked. Heard me what? Last Friday morning, 4:47 a.m. I was about to leave for work when I heard you on the phone with Jenna. Rodney watched her face carefully. You called me your personal ATM. You called me an idiot. You said I was pathetic. The color drained from Vanessa's face. Rodney, that wasn't... I didn't mean... You also mentioned that you've been taking out new credit cards, at least one with $15,000 on it, sent to your sister's place so I wouldn't find out, and that Italian leather bag that cost $200. Vanessa stood abruptly, her hands shaking. You were listening to a private conversation? That's a violation of what? My trust? My time? My money? Rodney set his bag down slowly. I've been working 5 jobs for 3 years, Vanessa. 90-hour weeks. I sold my motorcycle. I eat ramen for lunch. I walk to work to save gas money. All while you've been secretly shopping and laughing about how clueless I am. I have a problem. Vanessa's voice rose defensively. You know I have a shopping addiction. You knew that when you married me. You promised to help me. Help you, yes. Fund you endlessly while you mock me? No, that wasn't part of the deal. The deal? Vanessa's expression shifted from defensive to bitter. Is that what our marriage is to you? A deal? Rodney felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. You made it a transaction when you called me your ATM. I was venting to a friend. People say things they don't mean when they're venting. You've never said anything you regretted? Not about the person I claim to love. Rodney pulled out his phone and opened his notes app, where he'd transcribed the entire conversation. You said, and I quote, "He'll never leave. He's too honorable. He actually thinks he's being noble, working himself to death for me." Did you mean that? Vanessa's face crumpled. Rodney, please. I made a mistake. I'm sorry, but you can't just end our marriage over one stupid conversation. We can go to counseling. I'll really get help this time. I'll... There's $23,400 on a credit card where you listed me as an authorized user without my knowledge. The company confirmed it. She froze. And I found the shopping bags in the garage, Vanessa, under the tarp, behind my tools, designer clothes, shoes, accessories, thousands of dollars worth. Those were, she started, then stopped, realizing she had no good explanation. You've been having packages sent to your sister's apartment. You've been hiding spending from me while I've been paying off your debt. And according to my calculations, you've accumulated at least $38,000 in new debt in the past year alone, while I paid off $73,000 of your old debt. The silence that followed was deafening. I want it back, Rodney said quietly. Every dollar I paid, $73,247. My attorney is filing for reimbursement on grounds of fraud and deception. Vanessa's expression shifted from grief to rage so quickly it was startling. Fraud? You're calling me a fraud. I'm your wife. Not for much longer. You bastard. Her voice was low, venomous. After everything I've given you, after the life we've built together, you're going to destroy our marriage over money? Rodney stared at her. You destroyed our marriage the moment you decided I was just an ATM. I gave you 3 years of my life. I gave you $73,000 and my health. Rodney's control finally snapped, his voice rising. Look at me, Vanessa. Really look at me. I'm exhausted. I'm running on empty. I've worked myself to the edge of collapse for you. And you called me pathetic. Vanessa's face was flushed, tears streaming down her cheeks. So you're just going to throw away our marriage? Walk away from everything? You walked away from it a long time ago. I'm just making it official. She grabbed the divorce petition from the coffee table, her hands shaking. Your attorney is seeking full reimbursement of all payments made toward my premarital debt. That's insane. No judge will give you that. Maybe not all of it, Rodney admitted, but given your documented pattern of deception, the secret credit cards, and your own words admitting you were manipulating me, we'll see what the judge thinks is fair. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you would have done in Rodney's situation. This is revenge, Vanessa hissed. This is you trying to punish me. No. Rodney picked up his work bag. Revenge would be putting you through what you put me through. This is just me protecting myself and trying to recover from the financial damage you've caused. Where are you going? I've rented a room across town. I'll be back this weekend with friends to get my belongings. My attorney will be in touch about property division and settlement discussions. Rodney, wait. Vanessa crossed to him, her hand reaching for his arm. Please, let's just talk about this. No lawyers, no courts, just you and me, like it used to be. Like it used to be, when she'd played the devoted wife while secretly planning to drain him dry. There's nothing left to talk about, Rodney said. You made your choices. Now I'm making mine. He walked out the door, hearing her screaming after him, and didn't look back. The rented room was a studio apartment in a converted house near the University District, small but clean, $800 a month. Rodney set his bag down on the single bed and looked around at the space. Probably 400 square feet total, with a kitchenette in one corner and a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. It was the most peaceful place he'd been in 3 years. His phone was still exploding with messages from Vanessa. He blocked her number and sent a final text from his work phone. All communication through attorneys. Do not contact me directly again. Then he called Jennifer Bradford. How did it go? She asked. She's furious, claiming I'm being cruel, that we should work it out without lawyers. Classic response. She's going to try to manipulate you into dropping the petition. Don't engage. She had you served with divorce papers. That ship has sailed. Jennifer paused. Did she admit to the new debt? She tried to deny it, then pivoted to blaming her addiction, then got angry. She didn't explicitly admit the amount, but she didn't deny it either. Good enough. Discovery will uncover everything. Now, Mr. Malone, I need you to do something for yourself. What's that? Take tomorrow off. One of your jobs. Anyone. Sleep in. Rest. Because the legal process is going to be exhausting in its own way, and you need to start taking care of yourself. Rodney looked around his tiny studio apartment, his sanctuary, and realized Jennifer was right. For 3 years, he'd been running, on fumes, pushing himself past every reasonable limit, all for a woman who'd viewed him as a resource to exploit. I'll take tomorrow's rideshare shift off, he said. First day in 3 years, I haven't worked all 5 jobs. Good. You're going to need your strength, because Mr. Malone, I have a feeling your wife is going to make this difficult. Jennifer had no idea how right she was. Over the next week, Vanessa launched a full campaign. She called Rodney's parents in Portland, sobbing about how their son had abandoned her without warning, how cruel he was being. His mother called him, confused and hurt. Rodney, what's going on? Vanessa says you just walked out. She says she doesn't know what she did wrong. Rodney spent an hour on the phone with his parents, explaining the debt, the lies, the overheard conversation. His father listened quietly, then said simply, Son, you did the right thing. Come visit this weekend. Bring your laundry. Vanessa called Rodney's workplace, claiming there was a family emergency and asking them to tell him to call her immediately. Ray pulled Rodney aside. Your wife called, said it's urgent. Everything okay? We're separated. She's trying to get around the fact that I blocked her number. If she calls again, please don't pass along messages. Ray's expression hardened. Understood. Sorry you're going through this. Vanessa showed up at the coffee shop where Rodney did his data entry work, causing a scene that got both of them asked to leave. You're destroying my life, she screamed as the manager escorted them out. 3 years of marriage and you throw it away without a second thought? Rodney looked at her calmly. I had months of second thoughts. You just never noticed. The most shocking move came on day 9 of their separation. Rodney received a call from Jennifer. Your wife has filed a counter petition. She's seeking spousal support, claiming she gave up career opportunities to support your work schedule and that you owe her financial assistance during and after the divorce. Rodney felt his stomach drop. She's seeking support? After everything? It's not uncommon for the party at fault to go on offense as a defense strategy. She's trying to paint herself as the wrong spouse who sacrificed for the marriage. Don't worry, we have documentation that disproves her narrative, but this means the case is going to get uglier before it gets better. That night, Rodney sat in his studio apartment, exhausted from warehouse work and rideshare driving, and pulled out a notebook. He'd been keeping a journal since the separation, documenting his thoughts and feelings. Now he wrote, Day 9. Vanessa is fighting back. She's painting me as the villain, telling everyone I abandoned her, seeking spousal support despite lying to me for years. Part of me expected this. People don't change their core nature just because they're caught. But here's what she doesn't understand. I'm not the same person I was 10 days ago. For 3 years, I was Rodney, the devoted husband, Rodney, the hard worker, Rodney, the fool. That person is gone. I'm Rodney Malone, the man with 3 folders of documentation, the man who kept records, the man who walked away, and I'm just getting started. He closed the notebook and looked at his calendar. The initial settlement conference was in 3 weeks. Discovery would take another month beyond that. The full divorce process could take 6 months or more, Jennifer had warned him. Rodney had spent 3 years working 90-hour weeks. He could handle 6 months of legal proceedings, because at the end of those 6 months, he'd be free. And more importantly, he'd have something Vanessa could never take away from him, his self-respect. The question was whether he'd get his money back too. That answer was coming. But first, Vanessa had one more card to play. And when she played it, Rodney would discover just how far she was willing to go to avoid facing the consequences of her own actions. The settlement conference took place on December 20th in a bland mediation room at Bradford & Associates. Rodney arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in the one good suit he owned, the same one he'd worn to his wedding 4 years ago. Jennifer met him in the lobby. Ready? She asked. Ready. Vanessa arrived with her attorney, a slick-looking man named Derek Paulson, who wore an expensive watch and a carefully practiced expression of sympathy. Vanessa herself looked dramatically different from the woman Rodney had left 3 weeks ago. She'd lost weight, her hair was styled expensively, and she wore a conservative dress that screamed wronged wife. She'd even toned down her makeup to look more vulnerable. The performance began immediately. Rodney, her voice cracked. Thank you for agreeing to talk. Jennifer's hand on his arm kept him silent. They entered the mediation room where a neutral, third-party mediator, a woman named Sandra Ortiz, waited at the head of the table. Let's begin, Sandra said once everyone was seated. This is an informal settlement conference. The goal is to see if we can reach an agreement without proceeding to full litigation. Mr. Paulson, I understand your client has filed a counter-petition seeking spousal support? Derek leaned forward, his expression earnest. That's correct. My client, Mrs. Malone, gave up significant career advancement opportunities to accommodate her husband's demanding work schedule. She made sacrifices for their marriage and now finds herself financially vulnerable due to his sudden and, frankly, cruel abandonment. Rodney felt his jaw clench. Jennifer squeezed his arm again. Mrs. Malone, Sandra addressed Vanessa directly. Can you elaborate on these career sacrifices? Vanessa dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. I had an opportunity to take a position in San Francisco 3 years ago. Better pay, better title, real advancement potential. But Rodney and I had just gotten married and he didn't want to relocate. He said we needed to stay in Seattle to deal with my debt. Her voice caught perfectly, which I'd been honest with him about from the start. I turned down the San Francisco job to stay here and work on our marriage. The lie was so smooth, so convincing, that if Rodney hadn't been living it, he might have believed her. Jennifer opened her briefcase calmly. Ms. Ortiz, may I present some documentation? Please. Jennifer laid out a series of emails on the table. These are from Mrs. Malone's former employer, Datamark Solutions. You'll notice the dates. These emails are from 2.5 years ago. Mrs. Malone wasn't offered a position in San Francisco. She was actually given a performance improvement plan due to excessive lateness and missed deadlines. She was eventually let go for cause 6 months later. Vanessa's face flushed. Those emails are... How did you even get those? Discovery, Jennifer said simply. Your former employer provided them when we requested your employment records. Derek recovered quickly. My client's employment challenges were directly related to the stress of her marriage and financial situation. The debt my client disclosed before marriage, which Mr. Malone agreed to help manage, created enormous pressure. About that debt, Jennifer pulled out another folder. Rodney recognized it. Folder 2, the credit card statements. Mrs. Malone claims she was honest from the start about her financial situation. However, these statements show a pattern of deception. Original disclosure, $127,000. Actual debt paid by Mr. Malone over 3 years, $73,240. New debt accumulated during the marriage while hiding the spending from Mr. Malone. Confirmed at $23,400 on one account, with evidence of at least $15,000 more on cards Mr. Malone wasn't aware existed. Sandra's eyebrows rose as she examined the documents. Mrs. Malone, is this accurate? Vanessa's voice rose defensively. I have a shopping addiction. It's a recognized disorder. I've been struggling with it for years. My husband knew about my addiction when he married me. He can't now claim he's shocked that I spent money. There's a difference between struggling with addiction and actively deceiving your spouse, Jennifer said evenly. Mr. Malone has documentation showing that Mrs. Malone was having purchases shipped to her sister's address to hide them, claiming packages were gifts when questioned, and explicitly telling friends she was keeping the spending secret. Where's your proof of that? Derek challenged. Jennifer pulled out her phone and connected it to the room's presentation screen. Social media messages between Mrs. Malone and her sister, obtained through subpoena. Here's one from 8 months ago. Send the Gucci bag to your place. Rodney thinks I'm being good LOL. And another from 6 months ago. Got another card approved. Can't wait to go shopping this weekend. Don't tell Rodney, obviously. The messages appeared on screen, time-stamped and undeniable. Vanessa's face went pale. This proves nothing except private conversations, Derek argued, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. It proves a deliberate pattern of deception, Jennifer countered. But here's the most damaging evidence. She pulled out a transcript. On November 24th, 3 weeks before Mr. Malone filed for divorce, Mrs. Malone had a phone conversation with her friend Jenna Matthews. Mr. Malone overheard this conversation personally and is prepared to testify to its contents under oath. She slid the transcript across the table to Sandra. Rodney watched Vanessa's expression shift from pale to ashen as she realized what was coming. Sandra read aloud. He's just my personal ATM. The idiot actually believes I'm going to change. And later in the same conversation, Rodney, oh, he'll never leave. He's too honorable. He actually thinks he's being noble, working himself to death for me. Sandra looked up at Vanessa. Did you say these things? The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Vanessa's hands were shaking. That was a private conversation. That your husband overheard in his own home, Jennifer said, which he has every right to testify about. Derek conferred quietly with Vanessa for a moment, then turned back to the table. My client may have been venting frustrations in a private moment. That doesn't negate her legitimate claim to support after 3 years of marriage. Actually, it does, Jennifer said, because combined with the documented deception about spending, the hidden credit cards, and the provable lies about her employment situation, it establishes that Mrs. Malone entered and maintained this marriage in bad faith. Washington law is clear. Spousal support is meant to assist a spouse who made legitimate sacrifices for the marriage. Mrs. Malone's sacrifices were actually Mr. Malone working 5 jobs to pay debts she was actively increasing. Sandra reviewed the documents spread before her. Mr. Paulson, I'm going to be frank. Your client's counter petition for spousal support appears weak given this evidence. Do you want to reconsider your position? Before Derek could answer, Vanessa stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. You're all treating me like a criminal. I made mistakes, yes. But I loved Rodney. I still love him. We could work through this if he'd just talked to me, instead of hiding behind lawyers and documentation. Sit down, Vanessa, Derek said quietly. No. She turned to Rodney directly, her eyes filling with tears. Rodney, please, look at what you're doing. You're trying to destroy me financially, publicly humiliate me, take back every dollar you ever gave me, like our marriage meant nothing. Is this really who you are? Rodney met her gaze steadily. I'm the same person I always was. You just never actually saw me. I saw you. Her voice rose, cracking with emotion. I saw a good man, a kind man, and now you're becoming cruel and vindictive over money. Money, Rodney. We promised each other it was about love, not. You promised me you were changing, Rodney interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. You promised me you were getting help, being responsible, trying to heal. Instead, you were calling me pathetic to your friends and laughing about how easily you could manipulate me. So don't talk to me about promises. Vanessa's composure finally shattered completely. Fine. You want to know the truth? Yes, I spent money I shouldn't have. Yes, I hid things from you because you made me feel trapped. You worked all the time. You were never home. You made our entire marriage about my debt instead of about us. What was I supposed to do? Sit alone in that apartment while you killed yourself for a number on a spreadsheet? You were supposed to be honest, Rodney said. That's it. Just honest. Honest? Vanessa laughed bitterly. You want honest? Here's honest. I married you because you seemed safe, stable, the kind of guy who wouldn't leave even when things got hard. And I was right, wasn't I? You stayed for 3 years, working yourself to death, being the perfect, dutiful husband. I just didn't expect you to eventually grow a spine. The room went completely silent. Even Derek looked shocked. Sandra cleared her throat. Mrs. Malone, I think we should take a break. No. Vanessa was on a roll now, her carefully constructed victim persona completely abandoned. You want to paint me as the villain? Fine. But let's be real about what this marriage was. Rodney needed to feel needed. He needed to be the hero, the savior, the good guy. I gave him that. And now he's angry because he finally realized he wasn't saving me. I didn't want to be saved. I wanted someone who would fund my lifestyle without question. Rodney felt something cold and final settle in his chest. This was it, the final cruelty. Vanessa admitting in front of witnesses that their entire marriage had been a con from the start. Are you finished? Jennifer asked calmly. Vanessa seemed to realize what she just said. She looked around the room, at Sandra's stunned expression, at Derek's horrified face, at Rodney's carefully neutral one. That came out wrong. I don't think it did, Jennifer said. She turned to Sandra. Ms. Ortiz, I think we're done with mediation. We'll see Mrs. Malone in court. Derek grabbed Vanessa's arm as she started to speak again. Don't say another word. We're leaving. He practically dragged her toward the door, then paused and turned back. This conversation was supposed to be confidential. It was, Jennifer agreed, but Mrs. Malone just admitted to fraud in front of a neutral mediator. That changes things. After they left, Sandra sat back in her chair, looking drained. In 20 years of mediation, I've never seen anything quite like that. Will you testify about what she said? Jennifer asked. If this goes to trial? Sandra hesitated, then nodded. If subpoenaed, yes. What she admitted to, marrying someone specifically to exploit them financially, that's relevant to the case. Rodney sat quietly, processing what had just happened. Vanessa had finally told the truth. She'd married him because he seemed like someone she could use. And she'd been right. For 3 years, he'd played exactly the role she'd cast him in. But not anymore. What happens now? He asked Jennifer as they left the building. Now? Jennifer smiled grimly. Now we have ammunition. Vanessa just admitted to fraud in front of a witness. Derek will try to walk it back, claim she was emotional and misspoke. But combined with everything else, we're in a very strong position. For the reimbursement? For all of it. The divorce will be granted, obviously. You'll keep your separate property, and I think we have a legitimate shot at recovering a significant portion of what you paid toward her debt. Maybe not the full $70,240, but enough to make a difference. Rodney looked out at the Seattle skyline, gray clouds hanging low over the city. I don't even care about the money anymore. I just want this over. I know, but you deserve compensation for what she did to you. And more importantly, there need to be consequences. If Vanessa can do this to you and walk away unscathed, she'll do it to the next person. That thought hadn't occurred to Rodney. You think she'd do this again? People like Vanessa don't change, Mr. Malone. They just find new victims. The court date was set for February 14th, Valentine's Day, ironically. In the 6 weeks between the failed mediation and the hearing, Rodney's life began to slowly stabilize. He dropped the mall security job, cutting down to 4 jobs instead of 5. The extra 12 hours per week felt like a vacation. He started sleeping more, eating better, actually having time to think about something other than work. He also started therapy. His insurance through the warehouse job covered it, and Jennifer had recommended it during their last meeting. You've been through trauma, she'd said, even if you don't feel traumatized. 3 years of manipulation and exploitation leave scars. His therapist, Dr. Reeves, was a straightforward woman who didn't mince words. You're going to be angry, she told him in their first session. Probably for a while. That's normal. You gave 3 years of your life and $73,000 to someone who viewed you as a resource. Anger is appropriate. I don't feel angry, Rodney admitted. I feel empty. That's shock. The anger will come. She was right. Over the next several weeks, as the reality of his situation sank in, Rodney cycled through emotions he'd been suppressing for years. Anger at Vanessa for using him. Anger at himself for not seeing it sooner. Grief for the marriage he'd thought he had. Guilt for the time he'd wasted. You didn't waste it, Dr. Reeves corrected gently. You learned something crucial. You can survive hard things. You can work 90-hour weeks if you have to. You can keep going even when everything feels impossible. Those aren't small things, Rodney. You discovered your own strength. I discovered I was someone's ATM. No, you discovered that you were someone who kept commitments even when they were difficult. That's admirable. Vanessa exploited that quality, but the quality itself isn't a flaw. The therapy helped. So did the extra sleep. So did his parents, who called weekly, and reminded him he had value beyond his bank account. So did Ray at the warehouse, who promoted Rodney to shift supervisor with a small raise, saying, "You're the most reliable worker I've got. About time we made it official." Small pieces of a life, slowly rebuilding. Valentine's Day arrived cold and bright. Rodney wore his suit again. He really needed to buy a new one, and met Jennifer outside the courthouse. They'd prepared extensively. All the folders, all the documentation, all the evidence organized into a clear, compelling narrative. "Nervous?" Jennifer asked. "Surprisingly, no." "Good, because Mr. Malone, today you get to tell your story, and people are going to listen." The courtroom was smaller than Rodney expected, wood-paneled and formal, with Judge Maria Torres presiding. Vanessa sat at the defendant's table with Derek, wearing another carefully chosen outfit, this time projecting professional competence rather than victimhood. Judge Torres reviewed the case summary, then looked up at both parties. "This is a dissolution of marriage petition with a claim for reimbursement of payments made toward premarital debt. Both parties have submitted extensive documentation. I've reviewed everything. But I'd like to hear directly from Mr. Malone about why he's seeking reimbursement." "Mr. Malone, please approach." Rodney stood and walked to the witness stand. He was sworn in, then Judge Torres gestured for him to speak. "Your Honor," Rodney began, his voice steady, "3 years ago, my wife told me she had $127,000 in credit card debt from before our marriage. She cried, said she wanted to change, asked for my help. I loved her, so I said yes. I took on extra work, eventually 5 jobs total, to pay off that debt while maintaining our household. Over 3 years, I paid $73,747 toward her debt. And you're seeking reimbursement for that amount?" Judge Torres asked. "Yes, Your Honor. Because while I was working 90-hour weeks to eliminate her debt, she was secretly accumulating more. She was having shopping bags sent to her sister's address to hide them from me. She was opening new credit cards without telling me, and she was telling her friends I was her personal ATM, and that I was too stupid to notice what she was doing." Judge Torres's expression remained neutral. "You have evidence of this?" Jennifer stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We've submitted bank statements showing all payments made by Mr. Malone, credit card statements showing Mrs. Malone's new debt accumulated during the marriage, social media, messages proving she was hiding purchases, and testimony about statements Mrs. Malone made admitting she married Mr. Malone specifically because he seemed financially exploitable." "I'd like to hear from Mrs. Malone," Judge Torres said. Vanessa took the stand, her hands folded primly. "Your Honor, I made mistakes. I admit that. I have a shopping addiction, which is a real disorder. I've struggled with it for years. When I married Rodney, I thought I could manage it, but the pressure of the debt made it worse. I never meant to hurt him, and as for the things I said to my friend, those were said in a moment of frustration. I was venting. I didn't mean them literally." "But you did accumulate new debt while your husband was paying off your old debt?" Vanessa hesitated. "Some, yes, but not as much as he's claiming." Jennifer stood again. "Your Honor, we have documentation showing at least $2,400 in confirmed new debt on one card with strong evidence of an additional $15,000 on another account. Mrs. Malone has also admitted, on record during our settlement conference, that she married Mr. Malone because he seemed like someone who would fund her lifestyle without question. The mediator, Sandra Ortiz, will testify to this if needed." Judge Torres made notes, then looked at Vanessa directly. "Mrs. Malone, did you say that?" Vanessa's perfect composure finally cracked. "I was upset. The mediation was hostile. I said things I didn't mean." "But you did say them?" A long pause. "Yes." Judge Torres sat back, studying both parties. "I'm going to take a brief recess to review the documentation more thoroughly. We'll reconvene in 30 minutes. If you enjoyed this story, like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Those 30 minutes felt like hours. Rodney sat in the hallway with Jennifer, watching people flow through the courthouse. Other families, other disputes, other lives in various states of dissolution. "Whatever happens," Jennifer said quietly, "you did the right thing. You stood up for yourself. That matters more than the money. I know, but the money would be nice. She smiled. Fair enough. When they reconvened, Judge Torres had a stack of documents in front of her and a decisive look on her face. I've reviewed everything, she began. The evidence is clear. Mrs. Malone entered this marriage with significant debt, which she disclosed to Mr. Malone. However, the evidence also shows that while Mr. Malone was working multiple jobs to eliminate that debt, Mrs. Malone was actively accumulating new debt and hiding it from him. She made statements to friends and family admitting to deception, and during settlement mediation, she admitted to marrying Mr. Malone specifically for financial gain. Rodney held his breath. Washington law on reimbursement for premarital debt is complex. However, when one party can prove they made payments under false pretenses, believing their spouse was working toward financial responsibility while that spouse was actually increasing debt, the court has discretion to award reimbursement. Judge Torres looked directly at Vanessa. Mrs. Malone, your actions constitute fraud. You exploited your husband's good faith and work ethic for your own financial gain. That's unconscionable. Then she turned to Rodney. Mr. Malone, I'm granting your petition for dissolution of marriage. The marriage is dissolved effective immediately. Regarding financial reimbursement, I'm awarding you $58,000, approximately 80% of what you paid toward Mrs. Malone's premarital debt. This accounts for the fact that marriage does involve some shared financial responsibility, but also recognizes the fraudulent nature of Mrs. Malone's actions. $58,000. Not everything, but more than Rodney had dared hope for. Mrs. Malone will have 6 months to make this payment, either as a lump sum or in monthly installments of at least $9,000. Failure to comply will result in wage garnishment. Additionally, Mrs. Malone is responsible for all marital debt, including any credit cards taken out during the marriage. Mr. Malone is not liable for any of Mrs. Malone's debt, past or present. Judge Torres signed the order with decisive strokes. This case is closed. Mr. Malone, you're free to go. Rodney stood on shaking legs. It was over. After 3 years of exhausting work, months of investigation, weeks of legal proceedings, it was finally over. In the hallway, Vanessa approached him one last time, Derek trailing behind her looking defeated. I hope you're happy, she said, her voice bitter. You got what you wanted. Rodney looked at his ex-wife, and that's what she was now, officially, his ex-wife, and felt not triumph, but something like sad clarity. I wanted a partner, he said quietly. I wanted someone who would build a life with me, not on top of me. That's all I ever wanted. And now you have $58,000 in a divorce decree instead. No, Rodney corrected. Now I have my life back. The money's just a bonus. Vanessa stared at him for a long moment, then turned and walked away. Derek followed, already on his phone, probably calculating how they'd come up with $58,000 in 6 months. Jennifer shook Rodney's hand firmly. Congratulations, Mr. Malone. You did it. We did it. Thank you for everything. My pleasure. And Rodney, take that money and do something good with it. Take a vacation. Buy yourself something nice. Start a savings account. Whatever you do, make sure it's for you. Rodney drove to his parents' house that evening, the court order in his briefcase, his mind still processing everything. His mother made his favorite dinner, pot roast with vegetables, and his father opened a bottle of wine they'd been saving. To Rodney, his father toasted, who learned the hardest lesson of all. Some people aren't worth saving. That's not quite right, Rodney said slowly. The lesson isn't that Vanessa wasn't worth saving. It's that I can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. And more importantly, I can't sacrifice myself trying. His mother squeezed his hand. You're going to be okay, sweetheart. Better than okay. She was right. Over the next 6 months, as Vanessa made her monthly $9,000 payments, sometimes late, always accompanied by bitter text messages to Jennifer that Rodney never saw, Rodney rebuilt his life piece by piece. He dropped down to 3 jobs. The warehouse supervisor position paid better now, covering his basic expenses. He kept the freelance design work because he enjoyed it, and one rideshare shift on weekends for extra money. 45 hours a week instead of 90. It felt like freedom. He moved into a better apartment, still modest but his own space, decorated the way he wanted. He bought a new motorcycle, not as fancy as the one he'd sold, but reliable and fun. He started dating again, casually, learning to trust his judgment of people, and he saved money. Every penny of Vanessa's reimbursement went into a savings account he never touched. $58,000 sitting there, growing with interest, a cushion against future emergencies. 1 year after the divorce was finalized, Rodney ran into Kathleen Blake at a grocery store. Vanessa's mother looked older, sadder, but she smiled when she saw him. "Rodney, how are you?" "I'm well, Mrs. Blake. Really well. How are you and Bill?" "We're managing." She hesitated. "I want you to know, we heard what happened. The real story, not Vanessa's version." "I'm so sorry. We raised her better than that." "You did the best you could," Rodney said gently. "Vanessa's choices are her own. Still, you deserved better." Kathleen touched his arm. "I hope you find someone who deserves you." "I'm working on it, but first I'm learning to deserve myself." Kathleen nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the right approach." Rodney left the grocery store thinking about that conversation. For 3 years, he'd defined himself by how much he could sacrifice, how much he could endure, how much he could give. He'd measured his worth by his ability to fix someone else's problems. Now, standing in the parking lot with the spring sun warming his face, Rodney understood something profound. His worth wasn't measured by what he could do for others. It was inherent. He had value simply because he existed, because he was kind, because he tried his best, because he kept learning and growing. Vanessa had called him pathetic, but there was nothing pathetic about working hard, about keeping commitments, about trying to help someone you loved. The pathetic part would have been staying after learning the truth, accepting her exploitation because he thought it was all he deserved. Rodney Malone had walked away, and in walking away, he'd found himself. That evening, he sat in his apartment with a notebook, not the journal he'd kept during the separation, but a new one, and wrote, "Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming the person you were meant to be before someone convinced you that you weren't enough. I learned that you can't pour from an empty cup, that working yourself to death for someone who doesn't appreciate it isn't noble, it's self-destruction. That love without respect isn't love at all. I learned that keeping records matters, that documentation saves lives, that truth eventually surfaces no matter how carefully someone tries to bury it. But most importantly, I learned this. You teach people how to treat you. For 3 years, I taught Vanessa that she could use me, exploit me, mock me, and I'd keep coming back for more. The moment I stopped accepting that treatment was the moment everything changed. Not everyone deserves your sacrifice. Some people deserve your boundaries instead." Rodney closed the notebook and looked around his apartment. Small but comfortable, his sanctuary, his fresh start. He thought about the 5 jobs, the 90-hour weeks, the exhaustion and desperation and pain. It was over. All of it. And what came next was entirely up to him. If you enjoyed this story, like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.